Hello, welcome to the AI Lead Show. We're going to talk about AI-enabled business. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Lambert, and the key issue that we're going to explore today is the disconnect that often happens between business expectations and technical realities. We're going to talk a lot about real-world use cases, real-world examples, and we're going to explore how people work together to actually make AI happen and have it drive impact. Again, thanks for joining. Bringing in our esteemed panel. We've got orchestrator, we've scaler, and activator. Thanks for joining. How y'all doing? Good to see you.
Great.
Doing well.
Great. Well, let's talk a little bit about why tech and business teams must align. The key issue on this is when you talk about getting started, like we did last show. Once we get started, what does that look like? Well, it looks like a cross-functional team. It looks like strategic initiatives. It looks like tactical execution. But there is a reality here that has to do with the technical side, right? So business ideas have to become technical. In fact, you hear it all the time, 80% of transformations fail, or 50 to 75% of IT projects fail. And an example of that is, figuring out how to launch something in any industry, retail, manufacturing, financial services, and move beyond the pilot phase. And moving beyond the pilot phase is not easy. And we see that in the news, and we see it in the reality that plays out across many different actual organizations that are deploying AI and have been on the AI journey for quite some time. For example, at a Fortune 500 finance firm, they implemented fraud detection, but finance teams were not trained on how to actually interpret the scores. Or in a retail company, the tech team built great demand forecasting models, but marketing and sales didn't actually adopt those and use those AI insights. And most of the meetings that they had, they didn't even know it existed. So great execution, but the business side didn't pull it off and didn't use it, didn't adopt it. So when you think about these reasons why AI might not actually deploy, or maybe it's stuck, or maybe there's an issue with it, usually it's not because of technology, it's because of the people side of things. And we see that in the news. Let's jump into the news. AI is transforming how businesses operate. It's not just about chat bots, it's about automating workflows. McKinsey reports that AI-driven operations could boost productivity by 40% in the next 5 years. 80% of IT leaders say AI integration complexity is their number one challenge, but business teams expect fast AI results. They want tech teams to overcome this slow implementation, and they want it done, and they want it done now. So at the same time, you're hearing from Davos, you're hearing from a lot of executive leadership roundtables that AI is now a cornerstone of business strategy. 72% of organizations are actually integrating it into operations. The question is are you hearing about it where you work, and what does that look like? Companies are leveraging AI to automate tasks, optimize decision-making, and implementing AI transformation. And where they do that, there's valuation gains, up to 19% valuation gains in some organizations. But you know what? If you don't execute well, you actually can hurt yourself or shoot yourself in the foot with your valuation. The key is to align AI initiatives with revenue growth, customer centricity, customer engagement, and clear business objectives. One example of that is our feature story, which is Unilever. Unilever used AI to optimize their inventory management and supply chain. The key problem they faced was inconsistent inventory data across their multiple warehouses and suppliers. To address this, they actually implemented AI-powered demand forecasting models that could predict supply chain needs weeks in advance, and that led to a 15% drop in inventory waste and a 20% reduction in supply chain costs. That's pretty massive. That's pretty amazing. Unilever is a big company. That's a lot of money. The lesson here is that AI isn't just about automation, but making better business decisions. The adoption of AI requires a team effort. Business leaders need to understand the AI outputs, and tech teams must make that AI result easy to use. Let's talk about it. Let's bring our panel in. What do you think about the news and this idea that AI not only can make an impact, but it's real. It's here. I think it's here. It's actually got use cases. It has examples. It is happening. What do you all think?
Well, we're starting to see that happen. What's interesting is, and we talked earlier about this, that so these companies, again, aren't just buying technology, right? They're changing the way they're doing things. That's really what it comes down to. And I know today we're going to talk a lot about integration of AI throughout the workflows. And there's a piece in the AI lead that, day one, integration is what you need to spend time on. It's not a technical experiment. And I think that the companies are beginning to realize that it's time to put it to use.
And Brian, I'm going to use an example as a practical one. Have you ever gone on site with a client and you look in the lobby area and they got a poster up on the wall? It basically talks about their mission. Everybody's seen that, right? And it's got maybe 3 bullet points, 5 bullet points. 5 seems to be the max. Well, whatever the bullet points say, if I was promoting AI within an organization, I would lead with those 5 points. These AI models don't come trained for your business. But once it does become trained to your business, then it can begin to do some pretty fascinating things that you showed. The Unilevers of the world and so on, they're obviously aligned, and they're probably thinking about those 5 things as they're kicking off these projects. And that project's not a one-off. My bet is they've got a multi-year strategy. So this is a company thing. And even ask, people when you see those posters, how they feel about the things. Their answer is probably going to be, what does it mean to me, right? Let's ground that thing down to what it means to me. AI can actually take a high-level point and convey very specifically what it could mean to you.
Yeah, I love that. And that idea of that it's, for your organization and for you, that's really a promise of AI here that is important to realize, that it's not just a trend like, cloud. Cloud was a trend, but really where it took off was when you could deploy it for your own organization and make it your own. And that's the same thing that's going to play out here. What do you think, Activator?
I liked so much, and I was thinking about that example with the supply chain and how, years ago, people had to hire teams of process improvement, Lean Six Sigma experts to come in and do this for them. And now they're using AI and the different technologies to find these improvements in real time. You don't have to hire a bunch of people to do that. You can be using this as a catalyst for continual improvement of managing your business every single day. And I just think that's awesome. I mean, when you think about it, you don't have to spend 6 months figuring out what you should improve. Now you could spend 6 minutes on it. And let's do that. Let's go improve that right now. That's very cool to me. As someone who used to spend 6 months doing process improvement work.
Right. Or, there's a lot of work that happens in these roles of change management. And as a role, if you think about what that role usually looks like, it usually looks like, well, translating the strategy into some sort of project work, and then make sure everybody's involved and coordinating, right? Coordinating and making it all happen.
Yeah.
Maybe AI can play that role.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
Given that it has access to the data.
Yeah. The right data. Yeah.
The right data. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's part of the dilemma here. So let's keep this conversation going. I mean, challenges that we see is, poor communication, lack of strategic alignment, unrealistic expectations, and then where are organizations spending their money? Where are they investing? And is it in talent? Is it in data? Is it in process? Is it in tech? from an unrealistic expectations piece, business leaders want that chatbot. Hey, everybody else has one. Where's mine? So what's the use case and what's the impact? So, and how fast will it take? Right? How long will it take? To break this cycle, it's really important to have clear expectations. And what are those expectations? So what do you all think about that? This blend of technology and business coming together to drive execution. How do we help our viewers and our listeners overcome these execution barriers and move beyond ideas and pilots?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is, perception becomes reality, and right now we're all chasing what's the best model. And I sat in on a conference the other day where they were going through a process in which they were going to pick a model, and then my question to the group was, why do we have to pick one? So there is a lot of energy being placed on the technology, whereas it really ought to be placed on the potential of the technology. And then let's come back to the 6-month project that some of us have done here on the call as well. And you get to the end of the 6 months, and you're like, uh-oh, the business changed. And then also we didn't really get a sense for the people in the field. So these things never end. But what if this became what do they say now? AI first company. Let's say you're an AI first company. So everybody's thinking about this. But if this gets pigeonholed into pick the best technology again, I think we've done that for 30 years. Pick the best, right? Go take a look at the Magic Quadrant, who's in the upper right. Some of these ideas in the past, I think, need to be rethought.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I would just add to it, a lot of the problem space that you run into really does come into this idea of an expectation that never gets well communicated, and then it doesn't get executed. And then there's a huge waste of money when you've spent 6 months trying to get somewhere. You didn't communicate it to the right people. You didn't work it with the departments that it's impacting. And now your complete 6-month investment is ignored. It's active in an organization, but nobody's using it. And that's a huge waste of time, money, and it makes everybody tired, right? I think that's the really hard part is everyone gets tired. They get this fatigue associated with these changes or doom, if you will, that comes into their environment. And if they can have an active voice, they can be part of that expectation setting, and they can be part of the discussion about how to use the AI technologies for what they need to do in their job today. I think it would go a lot further than the way it's been done in the past, where it just gets put in front of a person and they're told, here, go use this. This is what we decided we're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing here with AI is if you go top down on this, and I don't know, somebody says, hey, we really need to think about AI from an HR perspective. Where does that go? And chances are right now that ends up in IT, that ask. Hey, you said the phrase AI, so go talk to IT. Okay. So now HR is now an IT thing, I guess, right? Okay. Hey, we need to do AI for supply chain. Let's go talk to IT again. Okay. So now IT is now supply chain. Or another one. Hey, we should really look at AI for our sales and marketing team. Okay. Let's go talk to IT. So now IT again is on the lead there. So does that mean IT is now all of these functions? Are they going to be the focal point, the first touch after finance to figure out where to deploy AI, or is the business going to step up and say, here's my requirements, here's what I'm thinking? Because right now it feels like literally every time AI is brought up, you said AI, it's over in IT. It's an IT thing. So go over there first. And I don't know if they're staffed to do that. I don't know if they're resourced to do that vetting. I don't know if they have the actual skills to pull off all of that. And then also, how do you prioritize when literally everything is coming to you? I don't know. That's what it feels like to me. That's what's happening. What do you all think? Have you seen that as well?
I'd say yes. I mean, if you look at organizations, there's really only a couple things that you're doing, right? You're either running your business, or you're growing your business, or you're transforming your business, and you've got a couple different business flows throughout those, right? And it's starting at that level and determining what do we want to work on first, right? And not turning this into as we said, a technical experiment. So you want to, start in sales and build something for them and let them pilot it, let them work on it. But
Right.
it tends to be an AI, it tends to be an IT discussion still. At least that's what I hear.
I think what you're trying to kind of poke at here, Brian, is the need for a strategy, right? That if we're going to do something, we can't just hand it over to a single department. There needs to be a strategy associated to it. Leadership across all functions in the organization should be aligned to it. And then if there is a decision that needs to be made about where it belongs, then that should be an active dialogue in the leadership rankings to make an informed decision about what makes the most sense. And if you just let a department that's already probably fighting for resources and are using as a service, right? If everything's as a service, this is how we're providing it to our employees, then they're really not going to have time to try to figure this out. They could work with their service providers and ask them, but then those service providers are not a part of their mission. So they're not going to be able to enlighten them either. So I do believe there needs to be conversation and a strategy to get it going.
Yeah, and to pick up on that, what's interesting about any new initiative is one of the first questions that come about is what department owns that? And then in turn, do we have to hire somebody to do that? Right. And if the vendor was being open about it, they'd end up saying, well, it's kind of a multi-department thing, but they don't. They just go after a department, make it easy, right? Find the department, message that department, sell to that department. You see where I'm going with this. It becomes siloed right from the start. Yeah. And then until they have somebody working on it full time, it doesn't seem to get off the ground. And you're like, well, that's because you made it a siloed thing. That's why it's not getting off the ground. And you mentioned something in our planning call, Brian. Yes, we do plan. And so in our planning meeting, we talked about the fact that the solutions ought to be pull, not push. Who wants to take on an initiative where you got to push? I won't pick on any, but I've had that chance or opportunity where it's a multiple year push. And you finally say, you know what? All right, we're just doing something wrong here. So AI should not be a push. AI should not be a departmental thing. AI should not require more bodies to be hired. And, it should start doing the work for you. I'll stop there, but this is a kind of key point, Brian. Usually about question number 2 or 3 from a prospective buyer was, who owns this?
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying is in the context of an AI enabled business, if it becomes, well, AI, you said AI or data, therefore that's IT, go there first. So what does that actually end up becoming? Well, it becomes a bit of a dilemma here, right? And an opportunity. So if AI is the first stop IT is the first stop for anything AI. There is an opportunity for IT to elevate their role in that and actually become even more empowered and maybe more resourced to figure out what that AI strategy should be. I will say there's an opportunity as well for the business to step up. Like it just feels like in a lot of these cases, if the business side, wherever that is, doesn't at least ask the question and engage, the default will become IT. And I don't know if I were in a business leader, if I would want that. I might want to ask questions about, hey, what is this AI thing? I might start with, well, what does AI actually stand for? What is AI? and then I might be like, well, what can it do? And how can it help? And it feels like with all this hype, I should be looking at it, but like, what do I do? And, do I go to the IT team or do I develop an approach and a strategy and a plan here? Or is it not my job? Is it IT? Right. And I feel like that's what's happening in a lot of cases.
And I was wondering, are there enough use cases out there? Like we see Unilever as a great example, right? I mean, so as these organizations are thinking about investing in AI, right? I mean, they're smart people, these leaders, you would think. I mean, they understand how to make things happen. But they're really still figuring it out. We're so early in this journey. I mean, there's how many fully AI native organizations are there that have AI embedded throughout their workflows that are models for organizations to
Well, the only ones that
scale.
exist are probably the ones that started in the last 6 months, you know.
Right. So it's
Yeah.
you know, they're figuring this out. They're using an old methodology, just like they bought any other type of software or try to make any other type of business decision. They're using that type of framework. And I think this is not just like buying technology. This is completely changing the way that you do things. It's a different mindset overall.
Yeah. I see we've got a comment from somebody joining us online from Kathy that she's mentioning we need to have a specialist from key departments that's working with IT. So I think that makes a lot of sense that you might have a team where everybody's represented and use that team to find possible problems you might want to consider solving using AI.
Yeah.
And they can work together on that.
Yeah, great points, Kathy. And I get excited when chats come in, so you may have seen me there jumping up and down in my seat. I was downright giddy there for a second. We got some chat going on. Thank you, Kathy, for that. You know what? I'm going to give Kathy 1,000,000 points. 1,000,000 points from Digital Command just now.
What's she gonna do with them?
I don't know, but it just feels good to have 1,000,000 points. So let's just give her those 1,000,000 points. Oh, and now Ken is involved, so he gets 1,000,000 points too.
Perfect.
2,000,000 points have now been distributed.
Coming back to Kathy's
it's not
point.
a science project, right? It's not an experiment. The business project.
If there ever was a project that needed a cross-functional team, it's this one. So to Kathy's point, you know, as you're looking at each department and maybe even each geo, you know, have somebody who's representing that group, understands the needs of that group, but make sure they are tech savvy. You know, they have to have done well beyond experimenting with AI, because if they've done more, they can come to the table and say, look, this thing is bigger and better. So I do like that point. But yeah, this is definitely a cross-functional thing.
Yeah, it can't be, well, go to that department, you know, so we're making that point loud and clear. And then I think from a leadership perspective, it's important to realize that there is a gap, and you can choose as a leader to occupy it or not. And I think that's an opportunity that everybody has to decide. Are you going to step into that gap? Because let's be honest, really nobody has the answers. From a generative AI perspective, we're 2.5 years into this.
Right.
You know, so if you're expecting somebody else to have the answers to this, it's just not going to happen. You've got to engage. So that's really critical. So an example of this is healthcare. I think when building this out, I wanted to make this real, right? So we all have healthcare. We all have healthcare challenges, needs, wants, family members. We're all impacted by health. And I think this is a great petri dish or experiment here to think about, or use case, or whatever you want to call it, you know, an example. These things happen, and they are happening. AI is impacting healthcare. When you think about managing expectations, making AI real, AI enabling healthcare, there's a lot of technical reality that has to come into play. If you're doing telehealth, if you're trying to automate billing, if you're trying to intake new patients, you have to have that tech conversation. So absolutely, IT should be involved. But what is the impact we're trying to drive? You know, one of the things, if you've ever built software, if you've ever worked with IT, the number one thing they'll ask is, what are the requirements? What are the requirements? What are the requirements? And you know what? That's a great question. You got to have the requirements. And where do those requirements come from? Well, they come from the business usually. They should, because the business has outcomes, goals. They're getting the funding. They're trying to drive impact, drive strategy. The question then becomes, how do you turn that strategy into action? And that means technology teams need requirements. They need to go through things like, what's the scope? How do we define sprints for this? How are we going to do this? How many people do we need? It all is all driven by the requirements. And if you don't have clear requirements because you don't know what AI can do, you know what? That's a bit on you, because you can't just pull a rabbit out of a hat. So the negative outcome here is frustration, anxiousness, because the requirements can't be defined because people don't know what is possible. They haven't done the work to define those requirements. IT isn't clear on exactly what to build because they're strongly encouraged not to waste cycles and waste time and waste money, and nobody wants to build something that gets parked in 2 months in. So this is a real example that is happening right now. I'm involved in 2 of these examples where the requirements aren't clear, and it's a lot of work because most people on the defining of those requirements are not aware of the powerful impact that AI can have, not only to decision making, but to, in this case, patients, or to workflows or processes. What can it do? And if you're trying to figure out what the requirements are in this year of the agent, that's a great spot to be in. But boy, can it be a bit frustrating. Right. So what do you think about that, orchestrator? What do you think about this idea of defining requirements, bringing technology and business together?
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of ideas around this. I was actually at a healthcare conference last spring, and the most well-attended session, there had to be like 900 people in the room, was the one on AI, because they began to explain examples of a use case that was in Spain where they were basically tracking an entire city, right, using AI, and the results of I won't get into the specifics because I quite frankly didn't understand them, but in the end, everybody was excited. You can't just leave these conferences excited thinking this is going to be something that's going to become a reality, because that group in Spain, they took 2 years on this project. But to me, it's, what are you going to do to put the foundation for AI success in place over the next, let's say, 3 months, at the same time doing in parallel a couple low-hanging fruit use cases, something that somebody could say, so this isn't just about getting better at prompting. I'm using an obvious example that none of us knew 2 years ago, so now we do. So we're evolving and changing and learning, but the idea is, know that there's a foundational piece to this. The companies I talk to today, where do I get pointed to first? When we first started selling SaaS, we were pointed to the IT group. Now I'm being pointed to the governance group. Right? They want to know that what it is they're going to be using is going to be something that's secure and there's no liability. And by the way, that's not just the businesses that are governed. So you do need to talk to this cross-functional team, create some wins, but know in the background, this foundational piece that isn't so sexy, that's going to be the piece that allows you to go from what I call foundational AI to optimized AI. It's funny to watch, because yesterday I went through 10 use cases for commercial real estate. I used AI, and I sat down with an agent that's a salesperson within commercial real estate, and I said, here are the 10. What are the top 2? And let's automate those. Oh, by the way, in the background, we're going to prepare for the other 10, but we're going to prepare data so that when we do run the other 10, because the last thing you want to do, now I'm jumping around, sorry, don't poison the well. Don't pick a bad use case. Don't pick a meaningless use, because if you do poison the well, what you now have done is created 6 months more delay, and you're baking it in. So, give people a list, a smorgasbord of use cases. It's very easy to find and discover these, put them in front of them, and then say, all right, of the 2 you mentioned, who in the executive group would look at those 2 and say, you know what, that's a big deal to the company. We typically find use cases that are a big deal to us. The person said, hey, I'm going to find my weakness and I'm going to shore it up with a use case. I'm like, well, that's good for you, but this has got to be, for both.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah. What are some of the questions that this governance team asks? What are a couple of quick hit questions that they might ask when you get routed there?
Yeah. And specifically the vertical was wealth management. And let's say that, one of the questions they wanted to understand was, well, you're using a AI note-taking tool. I happen to use Otter, call out to them. And so, with that, they said, well, that's great for you, but we can't do that. And if we can do that, we're going to have to go through a process with our clients to communicate that we're going to be recording the call. And we're going to have to communicate to the clients, why am I recording the call? And so that was a simple one, right? Because there are rules against certain things, and there's rules that are kind of gray right now. Those are the toughies. And then there's areas that are just, dead simple. Do you want to do a job description that you're going to post on your website? Go for it, right? But when you look at wealth management, it is highly governed, no different than the example you just used a minute ago there. So Brian, it's going to be a whole listing of everything from, can we do that with our clients, the customer facing stuff, or there's going to be this lingering, will we be liable? Will we violate some IP right? There'll be that kind of a conversation. So go after operational behind the scenes stuff first. Maybe those should be the quick wins. They're also going to want to know, where is this information, right? Is it everything from, is the data at rest encrypted, to is the transmission of that information encrypted? They're going to want to know that. But know that these models like OpenAI and such, and Claude and so on, they've thought through that. These models are 10 years in the making. So they are really secure. So I think it's, you hit these conversations head on. For those that sold SaaS 20 years ago, for whatever reason, tried to avoid IT. And we all knew we had to talk to them. So talk to the governance people, get an understanding of what their worries are. Then you can pick the use cases that they're going to say, you know what, you get a hall pass on that one before we know. Because there still are some use cases where we don't know.
Yeah.
This makes me think about the fact that, and I think it's in the AI lead book, that a readiness assessment for organizations, right? When it comes to looking at using AI and leveraging AI, right? I mean, if you think about the healthcare industry, first of all, what's the infrastructure that has to be, examined? All the different point systems and applications that those workflows, let's say, are using to provide service to their patients, to their staff, right? So how do you orchestrate all that and work through all that first, so that you know where you want to start, and you know which business, and you can make a jump into it because you've examined it. And I think that's something we probably should spend some time on in another episode, is just AI readiness assessment.
As I'm listening to everyone talk, in my head, I've got this, the 4 quadrants, right? And how we're trying to make a decision. And on one axis, I'm going to have risk. I want lower risk. And then the other, I'm going to want to have huge pain point. How much of this is a pain point? And it's sort of what I'm imagining in my head right now, listening to both of you talk, because so often it's easy to say, bring me a rock. Okay, I can bring you a lot of rocks. How am I going to find something that's going to be lower risk to get started and is going to actually solve a huge pain point in the organization? So I think that might be how I might want to think about it as we're talking about assessing and getting everyone together. We're going to have a lot of ideas out there, I'm sure. And I just do think reducing risk as much as possible at the forefront, so you have the chance of making it successful, is going to be really key here.
I would agree.
Yeah, great point. Like, what's inbounds, what's out of bounds, what can we do? What do we need to really stay away from? Because we've all been involved in these exact situations. When you start using AI or exploring it, the creativity is massive. It's just a massive explosion of ideas. And can we do this? Can we do that? What about this? What about that? And it's really important to go into those and encourage those discussions, but also have an understanding of what you can and cannot do, or should and should not do, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's a lot of what this show is about as well. So let's keep.
And Brian, before we move on, Mark, you brought up the idea of being able to profile, basically, right, and do the assessment up front. I love that, because ultimately, there's a few different things that you have to check readiness on. It's got to be, an organizational readiness. It's got to be a people readiness. It's got to be a technology readiness. The amount of money companies have spent over the last couple of decades on technology, you're not just going to leave it behind and replace it. Right. People, same thing. Organizational, driver, same thing. So I think the readiness assessment, even if it takes a few weeks to really dig in and go through it, if you do that first, you're not going to have the false starts if you don't do it at all. And you're also going to be able to kind of build mind share around it. So I love that idea. And so we've done 140 of these now, maybe a couple more than 140, but 140 roughly. There's trends already forming. And the trends are more people than they are technology.
Big surprise.
Imagine that.
Just imagine that. And how many are at optimized AI? I have yet to come across anybody at optimized AI.
Right.
But in a year, let's check back with them.
Yeah. Do we even know what that looks like yet? What is fully optimized AI?
Well, let's talk a little bit about that with our spotlight. Yeah. Great segue. And brought in some examples here. And I pulled in a healthcare company, pulled in a productivity example with recruiting, and then I pulled in a public sector example. And the reason why I picked all three of these is they started with the opportunity or the pain point, right? They were not a solution looking for a problem to solve. And they had obviously to pull something off like what I'm going to explain here, like with Accenture Health and Metascribe and ThinkBridge and the city of Buenos Aires. They had to have a plan and a strategy, and they had to know what was inbounds and out of bounds in order to make this actually a reality. So Accenture Health used Microsoft Azure's OpenAI service to develop this thing called Metascribe. And now nurses can process 20 to 30 letters a day with a 99% approval rate. ThinkBridge created a fully integrated AI-based digital recruiter within their application portal, streamlining enterprise scale. And then the city of Buenos Aires developed Body, an AI-powered chatbot that handles 2 million queries a month without human intervention, reducing operational burden by 50% and improving citizen experiences. If you don't know what it takes to do these types of things, that's okay. It's related to everything we've been talking about on the show for so many episodes. It has to do with understanding the strategy, finding the opportunity in that, and starting small, like we've talked about. But then in that cross-functional view of where we truly want to have an AI-enabled function or an AI-enabled process or an AI-enabled organization, it's about moving beyond the idea of what you cannot do or it's not my job, and moving into what's possible and how can I help? And I guarantee you for these things to happen, it was the latter. What's possible here and how can I help? So what do you think about that, Activator? How do we make that happen?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways, but I'll lean back into what I was already talking about earlier, which was identifying the pain, right? That's really where I think that's where you get the light to get started, is find the pain. And looking at these examples, one of the ones that draws my attention for a lot of different reasons, particularly on the human front, is how the city is sort of avoiding dealing with people using their bot. But maybe that's because they had so much information on their website that people couldn't navigate it. People couldn't find it. Maybe they were clicking through 50 clicks just to get to something. And so they called because they're like, I can't find this. I need to apply for my permit, or I need to do this. And that having something in place that can help navigate and avoid a phone call or avoid a frustrated person on the other side, that's pain, real pain that you want to solve. But also with that real pain, you're going to find improvement, right? You're going to find a way to actually do something good in the organization. And, your people in your organization are a really good place to start. They know where the pain is. You may not know as a CEO, you may not know as a manager. You're going to know as an employee down in the bowels of Administrivia. You're going to know what's causing pain and what's preventing you from getting all your work done. So I think that there's some interesting ways you can think about this, or even use a discovery process by just asking your employees, having a conversation, see where it goes, to try to figure out where that pain is and how you can start to tackle it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's using your own sales process on yourself to discover, right? Talking to those front line managers or people, right? That are the ones most affected by the issues that they're dealing with. And they're the ones that turn into your champions and your advocates for change. So that makes perfect sense.
And then just a general point here, Brian, I just love these use cases. There's 180 LLMs out there. Really? Do I care that now there's 180 of these things? No, but these use cases are great.
Yeah. That back to your point earlier of like, let's have a meeting to vet all 180 LLMs. Why would we do that?
Yeah.
Let's have a meeting to figure out what problem to solve.
Yeah.
Hey, good
Yeah, great use cases.
My son is in travel, so I wanted to explore what Airbnb is doing, because I know their user experience has to be powered by AI. You can just the more you spend, investigating, the more you spend maybe actually deploying AI. The more time you spend exploring the impact of artificial intelligence and generative AI, the more you can recognize where AI is powering something and how it's helping. But from an AI-enabled business perspective, like, let's talk about what Airbnb is doing. Well, they started with a clear problem to solve, right? So the first one on the previous example was find the pain. This opportunity spotlight is about be clear on the problem you're trying to solve. They wanted to figure out how to create better pricing guidance, right? Dynamic pricing in order to maximize earnings. The approach was for the tech teams to work closely with business teams to figure out the right solution. And to Craig's point, that doesn't mean pick a technology and go with it. When we talk about solutions in the AI space, we're talking about everything from data pipelines to reporting to analytics to, yes, fine, an LLM, but you might actually use 4 or 5 different LLMs. You might use a lot of different APIs. There's a lot in this simple word of solution, and it doesn't mean just buying the tech. So that solution that they were looking for was to embed AI insights directly into the host dashboards, making it easy for the host to use. And the result was impressive. And 90% of the hosts started adopting the AI-powered pricing suggestions. Because why? Because they didn't have to think about it, and they knew it was going to help them maximize earnings. I think this is a great example of business and tech coming together. I understand the idea here of the business side of driving revenue and increasing costs and earning profitability. But I also understand the tech underneath something like this at scale and at real-time speed is massive. Like there is a lot of intentionality, structure, strategy, logic, and precision in making something like this work.
And how many listings are there that they have, right? Millions of them.
So that massive opportunity and that wealth making, revenue generating idea has to start with what problem do we want to solve? And that you don't just wave your magic wand and make this happen.
Well, it's interesting.
So Brian,
I was to say, it's interesting to talk about it. I actually am a host for Airbnb in my side gig life. And I would just say it is very cool what they have done here as someone who uses this technology on a daily basis. But I would say more importantly, by starting down the path of just trying to help somebody price, they actually now have been able to take it to a whole new level across and even push the industry this direction where they're putting more clarity into what pricing you're paying for, right? And I know that there's a lot of frustration there for consumers, but they were able to just continue to bonus off of just that one thing and then turn it into a lot of different solution space for managing the problem. So I think it's a really good case when you think about the why, but more importantly, they were able to continually improve it and use it in many different ways they hadn't originally started out doing. And I think that's what we're trying to get to here with using AI as a force within the business.
So using your first of all, I'm glad you jumped in front of me because you just took the use case to a new level, and so with taking it to the new level, when you first were a host, where would you have started? What would you have done to come up with the best price for a property?
Well, I just researched everyone else what they were doing. That's what I did, right? So I would go out and spend time researching. I'd go on different sites. I'd look at hotel prices because, I'm somebody that was in sales and done a lot of consulting research in my life, but I'm not normal. I'm not like all those other hosts that are out there. So for me, I was already doing that. So I felt confident. But there are a lot of hosts that did not do that, did not have that career, didn't have that capability. They weren't doing that work.
Right. You're a little more tech savvy. So AI would have automated that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it would have done it on Monday morning if you set the trigger, right, at 8:00 every week for you. So if you put a stake in the ground, right, and only let me use that term once, right, you put the stake in the ground right now and you say to yourself, all right, we're going to do price analysis every Monday and we're going to do this triggered, automatically. What would happen in 12 months? What would happen in 24 months? Imagine the wealth of information, the data you would have at that point to go well beyond because where did the competitors get, the pricing? So ultimately, if you put the stake in the ground now and start doing what you're showing, Brian, I just wonder how much information they'd have at the end of this year.
Imagine
Yeah.
all the insights you would gather from that, all the connections that you
Yep.
would make. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely. Oh, and Ken just took the lead. He's got another 1,000,000 points for another chat. So he's up to 2 million digital command points. You don't know where you're going to use them, but hey, you got them.
How do I get into that game? Go on.
I guess you can't be on the show. You have to just be in the audience next time.
Yeah. Nobody knows what they are, but boy, everybody wants one right now.
Are we gamifying the show now?
Yeah, we did just now. Thanks to Kathy.
We need to rework my contract.
Yeah,
Start with a purple
that's
shirt.
right. That's right. All right. So these are great examples. I totally agree. And what the thing I want to drive on this is in the book, the AI lead book, I talk about the idea of a speed layer and what that is and how it works from a tech perspective. In an example here of Airbnb, they probably have hundreds of speed layers working. And that poly speed layer, if you will, is orchestrated in a way to achieve a business outcome. So this business model, to Activator's point, is evolving, and so is their success story. It's a new way to drive revenue, to think about it this way,
Yeah,
which is the opportunity. So great examples, great discussion. Let's move into how do you make this work? How do you make it work? And how do you actually build some sort of AI-enabled capability in your organization? And that's the key word here, is that AI is a capability. It's not just a chatbot. It's not just a technology. It's not just a tool. It's not just a headline or a buzzword. It's actually a capability, especially generative AI, where it can do things for you. And when you think about AI as a capability, how do you execute in that? Well, first of all, have a problem and have a clear pain point to solve. Then align it to the business metrics and think about, well, what's the upside here? What's the opportunity? How are we going to actually see if we're making an impact? And then find some early adopters to get involved. You know, there's an idea here that we're all figuring it out as we go. And the mindset is really critical here. Jump in and figure it out. Give ideas. You don't have to have all the answers. And AI adoption champions can help with that. So take on that role. Get curious. Explore that. And then think about how it impacts workflows. The thing about the Airbnb example is when you think about how the place works, the operating model, the organizational design, how Airbnb works, it's not as siloed as you might think. It's actually built based on more about value flows and how the flows of value are created. And it's more of a digital operating model, if you will. So we have to move beyond the org chart at some point. The way we do that is to think about workflows. So Scalar, what do you think about this from a execution perspective? What are some of the scaling challenges that people might experience as AI continues to get a foothold?
Well, yeah, a number of them. I mean, first and foremost, they tend to spend a little too much time in the testing portion of things, trying to work it out. And at what point in time do you say, hey, we're ready now to integrate this? Secondly, is having a integration strategy. I mean, if you're not just not looking at AI is just a project or a technical project that we work on, and that's it. This is a continuous program. You want to have some type of iterative deployment that happens across different departments so that nobody's really left behind and everybody gets an opportunity to utilize it. I mean, and that way you really get a chance to see, okay, how well are we doing, right? You set some milestones, you determine what type of workflows you want to begin with, and then you gather your feedback. It's really fairly simple. It's just if people would think about this more as hey, we're changing the way we're doing things across the organization. We're just not investing in a new technology. As you say, it's a capability, and let that drive your process. Sounds kind of general, but it's pretty common sense, I think. And one you would think leaders, that are educated would know or would be able to figure out. But they seem to keep making the same mistakes over and over. Not quite sure why that is.
Well, we all do, I think, in that regard.
Right.
I think that there's a lot of human nature in something like this, and that I call it getting tangled. And getting tangled is a real challenge. It's a barrier to action. That's a whole other show. It's a whole other topic. You can check that out on the Academy. There's a course on it. But I think that people feel tangled on what to do and how to go about it. And the key here is to really realize that the enemy of progress is this quest for perfection and having everything figured out on the front end. And you just, in today's fast moving world, you can't just have it all figured out and then go implement. You have to learn by doing, and you have to learn by engaging and figuring it out as you go. And that feels risky to a lot of people.
Understandable.
One thing just came to mind here is I was having a conversation yesterday with an individual who leads up a workflow management tool. And it's a tool that's smart enough to pick the right model for the use case on the fly. So I started testing the model, of course. And then I said, I'm talking to somebody in commercial real estate. We're in the process of training the model for them. And by the way, these models don't come right out of the package trained. Not for your business, what makes you unique. And Brian, the reason this just came to mind was that we're doing what's known as a market intelligence agent, becoming known. What does it do? It tracks property trends, pricing, competitors, right? All the things that we just talked about with the Airbnb example. Then we pivoted and said, all right, now let's take a look at monitoring listings, forecasts, investment potentials, things that are in the news, right? All things that somebody in property management is going to be doing, commercial property management. And then the third use case, because again, I usually have the client pick 1, 2, or 3 use cases, is going to be all about compliance, so that we can make sure that when we talk to that governance person, there's something for them, because they could be the gatekeeper in this deployment. But the idea being is that this person that leads up this workflow company said, you got to stop thinking about having to have a person to trigger these things, right? We're in this click, click, click world still today. He goes, no, this could actually happen based on something that happened in the news, something that happened on your calendar, something that happened in your CRM. When those things happen, we can build workflows that do really useful things like the 3 you just mentioned for commercial real estate on your behalf, so that when people get into the office the next day, the work's already done. And that mentality, that shift of it can actually do it for you. Some people are a little worried, right, when it's doing it for you because you want to be in control. But do you really want to be controlling when this thing is triggered to go find out about the competition? Or do you just want it to do it? But I have to unlearn this click, click, click mentality.
Right. Yeah, I totally understand and agree with that. It's a real world example, and something that I experience as well. And in the work that I'm doing is this idea that things can happen automatically, and you can still be in control, and more importantly, have the quality that you're looking for by engaging and letting it do the work and doing that human in the loop piece, right? So that's part of what we've been talking about, is the idea of understanding how to map it to use cases, those use cases to the strategy, thinking about how we integrate it into the daily workflow, and then piloting AI solutions with clear feedback loops. An example of this is the idea here that with these AI systems, as Orchestrator has been talking about, they're not necessarily out of the box, aware of your organization's context and documentation and knowledge. There are ways in which you can help it understand those things without necessarily sharing all your trade secrets or all of your proprietary information and not exposing that. There are now technologies and tools and processes and approaches that allow you to do that. The challenge, though, becomes in understanding the workflow and the productivity expectations and impact of the people that are using or benefiting from AI. So in other words, if you're using AI, generative AI for marketing, maybe that won't apply to finance. But you know what? The idea of customer can apply to both. So there's a leverage here, and there's some economies of scale from a knowledge perspective that can happen when generative AI is deployed. The key is, and most business people that I talk to are not aware, that you could take a whole, I don't know, 2,000 PDFs and have those 2,000 PDFs be part of the answers that you get back from internal generative AI, and none of those individual pieces in the PDFs are used to quote unquote train a model, that a large platform model, an LLM. It happens a lot through the technology of what I mean by that is the privacy and the security and the proprietary nature of your interaction can be, protected without exposing it to these LLMs. So the evolution of these things is more and more prevalent. The idea of improving productivity is real, and you have to be curious to explore those things, right? So that's a critical aspect of becoming an enterprise AI organization. Let's talk about the final piece here, that AI is part of machine learning, and leaning into the fact that machine learning and AI is good at math. So if you have large data pools, if you have large repositories of data, if you need real-time data crunched, ML and AI is really good at that. And you saw that with the Airbnb example. You see that in healthcare with healthcare records. You probably see that on Netflix when you're scrolling. There is a lot of math and algorithms behind the scenes pulling that off. And that you don't necessarily have to know all that math, but you do need to be aware from a business perspective that math needs to happen. And that's why AI is so powerful, but it has to do the math. So figure out where the math needs to happen. The stuff that you don't want to do if you're not good at math, like me. Let it do the work for you, right?
I like that too, because confidently with math really only has ways it can be solved, right? They are repeatable formulas that come up with the same answer when used correctly. So when you're thinking about a confidence level with machine learning, if it's good at math, that makes me feel a little bit better about using it in my business.
Great point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So one of my favorite parts of the show is to think about and talk about what are our aha moments and takeaways. So team, what stuck out to you about today's show? Any aha moments, any takeaways? If you have any on the chat, feel free to provide it. Thank you to our anonymous LinkedIn user for this idea of flagging that AI is taking off in the bank compliance world, and thanking us for the idea of governance and compliance. You're welcome for that. And 1,000,000 points to you, LinkedIn user, anonymous LinkedIn user. You know who you are. You can be glad that you also got 1,000,000 points. And
Kathy did too.
And so did Kathy. Coming up to Ken, 2,000,000 points each for Kathy and Ken. Congratulations. Don't spend them all in one place. You're right, Kathy. Often efficiency inhibits creativity and freedom to try new things. Spot on. That's a great aha moment. Team, what other aha moments do you have?
My aha moment was, again, when we defined, AI as a capability, right? You're not investing in a technology, you're investing in a capability. So if you're bringing in a capability into the organization, is that a different process than just investing in technology or just investing in a resource? And how do you approach that differently? Because a capability can be, again, integrated throughout an organization. So you're just looking at this differently in terms of what we're actually building and investing in. So that stuck out to me.
Thanks.
I want to research that.
One quick one here, Brian, and that is, this is a company thing. This is not an IT thing, not a sales thing, not a marketing thing. This is a company thing.
Yeah, thanks.
And I just think a good reminder that strategy is really important here, that without a strategy, it will not go well and it will likely fail. So let's start thinking about strategy as soon as we can. If there are good ideas out there in your company, start figuring it out now. Start planning for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you need help with that strategy, feel free to attend our webinars. We actually have one coming up in 2 weeks around strategy and AI strategy. So check out digitalcommand.co/webinars. That's going to conclude the AI Lead Show for today. On behalf of Orchestrator, Scaler, and Activator, thanks for joining every Friday at noon. We'll see you next week where we're going to talk about the idea of orchestrating all this as AI orchestrators. I hope you'll join us next week for our live show, the only live show on AI transformation. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Have a good weekend.